Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and I'm going to show you how to paint this lovely garden fence. The first thing that I'm going to do is measure 10 inches up from the bottom of the canvas. I am going to draw the fence layout first. So the fence is relatively 10 inches high. And I'm going to use my T-square ruler to draw a horizontal line across. And then I'm going to measure the in-between lines of the fence post. So the fence post, if you want to measure it, mine were about 2 1/4 inches wide. You can also do 3 finger widths wide. The in-between, so the posts are about 3/4 inches in between. So I'm measuring 2 1/4 and then 3 1/4 and then 2 1/4. So you have the fence posts and you have the in-between gap between the fence posts. And I would use my T-square ruler to measure, but there's paint on my numbers, so that's why I'm switching back and forth between the ruler and the T-square. But the T-square ruler helps when you do the drawings to get your lines really perpendicular. The edge of the T-square ruler can line up with the edge of the canvas. So you see me drawing the lines from the bottom to where I made my marks. You're going to see later that my masking tape that I used to mask off this fence is slightly wider, slightly thicker than the in-between line that you see, and that is going to be okay. So just kind of bear with me. These measurements do not have to be exact. In fact, if you want to just draw it with the ruler, I recommend drawing with the ruler, but you don't really need to measure it per se. In fact, I think it gives the fence a little bit more character when they're not exactly all the same width, if that makes sense. Okay, so we have the base shape, and now we're going to draw the triangular tops of these fences. So what you see me doing with the pencil is drawing a triangle. Kind of imagine where the center of that rectangular post is, and that's where the tip of the triangle is. Then you want to go in with an eraser and erase all of that horizontal line that you first drew, and then you have yourself 4 fence posts ready to be painted in. I like to use a big paintbrush to get rid of all the eraser marks, and we're going to move on to the next step. So now we're going to load our palette with Cerulean blue and titanium white, and we're going to grab 2 paintbrushes. We're going to use mostly this big 3/4 inch wash brush, but later on we're going to use the 12 bright brush, so keep that one handy. We are going to paint everything around these fence posts first. And with this wash brush, sometimes I like to dip it in the water and just apply a very thin layer of water to the canvas first. This is helpful in getting your paint to flow right away. If you're doing this on an easel, it's easy to determine how much water is too much because you don't want it to be dripping down. You just want it to be a nice, very thin film of water, and you can see what happens when I add the Cerulean blue. It spreads very, very fast and thin, and that's okay. This background layer is a thin layer. So starting with the Cerulean blue at the top, and eventually I'm going to load my brush in the white as well. We want it to be slightly more pure blue at the top, but we want to get it to kind of blend into a sort of lighter blue as we go down. I'm not really going to do an ombre effect. I'm just going to let the colors sort of blend, and you see what happened, what I did there. I loaded it in the white, and I'm just blending it in with that blue, and I'm just kind of letting the colors do their thing on the canvas. Notice that I am getting paint over my lines, and that is okay. I can still see my pencil drawing through this paint, and if you don't want to do it that way, if you want to go in and if you want to use your brush to really cut in on the shape and paint all the way around those fence posts, that's fine. You can do it that way. When I'm doing a background behind an object, I really like to just go over the lines. I find it easier that way. We are going to go in with the masking tape and mask off the sky, and we'll really define those fence posts with white paint, and very opaque white paint that is, so it will go over the blue. But like I said, if you want to go in and go around the lines, you can. In fact, use your smaller brush, especially for the in-between areas of the fence posts. I'm going to keep applying this blue and white combo until my entire background is filled up. Notice how I'm just letting the colors blend. I'm adding a little bit more cerulean at the top because I wanted it to be slightly darker at the top. I am going to go silent here for just a little bit while I finish the background. Okay, we have our background done. I'm going to rinse off that brush, set it to the side, and dry my painting. This masking tape works best if all that blue paint is dry. So what I'm doing is, this is just basic masking tape. I am masking off the fence around the area around the fence. So this is the triangular top part of it. I'm just ripping small pieces of masking tape, and this is going to mask off the sky so that when I paint it in, it'll be a nice crisp white line. Now here is what I was talking about earlier, how my masking tape thickness is thicker than 3/4 inches, slightly thicker than that. So we can do two things. I could cut the masking tape to fit in between, or I can just say that the thickness of this masking tape is going to be the width between the fence posts. When you're masking this off, you really want to pay attention to the lines that you drew for the fence. That is where your masking tape, the edge of your tape should line up with. So especially on the top where the triangles are, you really want to make sure the edge of the tape is along the pencil lines. So next we're going to paint our fence in. Load your palette with a tiny bit of Mars Black. You don't need a lot of black for this. And reload with some more white if you need more white on your palette. We're going to use our 3/4 wash brush. I'm going to load it in white, and I'm going to just grab a little bit of black on the corner of the bristles. So now my brush is double loaded, and when I paint the fence, we're going to do up and down strokes, and we're going to let that black blend with the white. It's going to create a streaky look of white and black, those two colors mixed together to make gray. So our fence is not going to be 100% pure white. It's going to be mostly white, but it's going to have some gray streaks in it to give it that sort of rustic look, and to make it look interesting, have that nice impression of wood texture. So I'm just going to fill in each of these 4 fence posts using this technique of letting the black and white blend together. If you wanted a slightly darker fence, you would just add some more black to your brush. If you don't want it very dark, then don't use very much black. We are going to go back over this. When this dries, we're going to go back over it with a dry brush of white. So our fence is actually going to be a lot lighter than this right now. So I'm going to keep painting each of these fence posts. You may find that as you work your way to the next post that your brush might start getting too loaded, especially with the black. So if you notice that all of a sudden there's too much black on your brush, you can rinse it off, but really dry it off if you try to rinse it off, or you can wipe it off with a paper towel, and that'll get it so that the black doesn't start accumulating too much on your brush. Okay, so I'm going to go silent here while I finish my last fence post. It looks like we have a gray fence now, and we do. It's a gray fence, but we want it to be a little more white. So what you can do is completely dry your painting, or take like a 5-minute break and come back and load your 12 bright with some white, but we want to do this dry brush style. So we want to load our bright brush with the white, but we want to kind of like wipe it off with a paper towel so there's not a lot of paint on your brush. And we're going to add these dry brush strokes over our gray wash, and it's going to make it look even more rustic, but it's also going to brighten the color up a bit. So when you do the dry brush, we don't want to completely cover everything that we've already painted. Dry brush is see-through, so it adds an interesting layer because you have the sort of streaky look of the paint, but you can see the under layer below it, and it makes it look very pretty. So I'm going to continue to add these streaks of just the titanium white. Don't load your brush in any more Mars Black at this point, so just the white. And then like I said, I'm not covering everything. I'm just applying long vertical strokes, and it's creating this really pretty texture just because there's no water on my brush. I'm not loading my brush with a lot of paint. It's very streaky and dry. Okay, so you could technically, I think technically we have to wait for our paint to dry to pull the tape off, but I'm usually not that patient with that. I think I let it dry just a little bit, but I want to pull my tape off. So gently, carefully pull your painter's tape off, and you will see the fence posts revealed. And already I can still see some of my original pencil lines that were the in-between lines because of the thickness of my tape. It's too late to erase that with an eraser, but that can easily be remedied by getting some more cerulean blue and white, loading. I'm using the 12 bright, so that smaller flat brush for this, because I don't want to paint over my fence posts at this point. And it goes right over the pencil line. So especially if you use that titanium white is a very opaque color, and that really helps to cover up any pencil lines that are still showing through. So that is what I am doing here. And we next need to do this horizontal beam of our fence. So grab that T-square ruler again and line it up to the edge of the canvas like so. And let's see, I'm going to estimate this, I'd say about 2 finger widths down from the top edge part, not the triangle part, but the top corner part. And it's probably about 3/4 inches thick going down. So I did 2 horizontal lines. I did not make my pencil line go across my posts because I didn't want to go back and edit those pencil lines. So I just drew my pencil lines where the sky is. Okay. To paint this post in, we're going to use our 12 Bright and just the titanium white. There's a lot of white in this painting, and this big tube of white paint that I have is just about finished. I have to grab a different one here. Okay, and then so the 12 Bright brush, I don't think that this bright brush is 3/4 inches thick, so I'm using the width of it, but it's not the size of the horizontal beam, so I'm painting it in. So it's the thickness of what I drew on the canvas. And then, of course, I painted over my fence posts, but I can easily just go back in there and remedy that really quick with the gray wash. And so it looks like we have our horizontal beam in place. And then next, we need to do our nails of the fence. So turn your brush over, dip it in the black, and stamp each of those dots on your fence. Next, I'm going to do some outlining, and I'm going to load my brush here so that my paint is on the very tip of my brush. And I'm going to use that tip of the brush to outline just the bottom of my horizontal beam. Okay, so I'm going to load it again, get the paint right there on the tip of the brush, and sometimes it helps to drag the paint out a little bit on the palette. I'm going to do the vertical posts, and I'm going to outline only the right side of each of my vertical fence posts. Again, I'm just using the tip of my brush, and it's I'm able to create that very thin sort of crisp line, and then I'm going to do the right part of the triangle, and that's it. Okay, so on this one, I'm just doing the right part of the triangles. Okay, and then the vertical part on the right. Paint over the horizontal beam part. So that vertical line on the fence post goes all the way up and crosses over the horizontal part. Okay, nice steady hand for this. You can use a paint pen, a Sharpie, a really tiny round brush. I just happen to be doing this with the bright brush to really get that paint on the tip so that your bristles are nice and collected together to create that straight edge. When you load the bristles in the paint, you want to drag it out a little bit, but really dab it right there where the paint is, just to get the paint right there on the tip of the brush. That'll get you your nice crisp vertical line when you paint this. So we are done with our fence, and we're going to move on to the floral fauna part of this painting. We're going to start with the grass. So there's some grass on the bottom, and I'm going to load my palette in red and green. So Hooker's Green and Cad Red Medium Hue. Just a little bit of red for now. Grab my bright brush, make sure it's all cleaned off, get all that black off of it. we're going to load it in green, and I'm going to grab a little bit of red and blend it on my palette. When you add a little bit of red to green, it creates a kind of a more natural looking green. And we're going to do the grass. So this is the same technique I used to outline the fence posts, but I'm doing grass blades. So I'm starting on the bottom of the canvas and sort of dragging my paintbrush up to create lines that are going in sort of different diagonal directions. I like to make color variation in my grass. So when you go reload, you can grab some white to get that grass, some lighter grass blades in there. You can grab just pure hooker's green with no red in it. You could even mix a more darker green by mixing a whole bunch of red into it and doing it that way. So just doing some color variation makes the grass more interesting to look at. And I did grass all across the bottom of the painting. And then I'm going to show you how to do these roses. So roses are kind of intimidating. I will admit that I am not the greatest rose painter myself, but I used to practice, and I find that doing it this way is not as restricting, I feel, and it's a very simple method and still effective because it looks very pretty in the end. But on my palette, I'm going to add a little bit more of the cad red and freshen your white if you need to. But we're going to kind of mix on our palette a sort of a dark pink color. So red, and then add a little bit of white in there and blend it on your palette. So we have a dark pink looking color. And then we are going to paint circles. So these are going to be kind of large circles. And if you feel more comfortable, you can draw the circles out with chalk to figure out your placement. But I am just going to figure out my placement as I go along here. But I'm going to paint a circle. And this is going to be the base for our rose. I'm not worrying about the petals or anything like that. I'm just painting a circle with this round brush. Oh, I probably should mention I am using a 4 round brush, painting in sort of a swirly sort of fashion, starting from the middle and kind of swirling out. The swirling, I guess, isn't that important right now. And I think this rose is probably about 3 or 4 inches in diameter if you wanted to kind of measure that, just to make sure you're painting them large enough. You don't want them to be tiny, but kind of large. And so I'm going to paint a few more circles. And for the sake of variety, I'm going to make these circles all slightly different tints of that red, which means that I'm adding maybe for this one, I'm adding a little bit more white into it, and it is a lighter color circle. You could also make your circles slightly different in size. So this one is probably going to be slightly smaller, not too much smaller. And then I'm going to do a third circle. Again, I'm going to make it a different tint, so add different amounts of the red and the white. And let's see, this one's going to be on the bottom. It is probably going to go off the canvas a little bit, so maybe it's more like 3/4 of that circle showing at the top. And then we have a rose bud. So this rose is not going to be a circle. It's going to be like a cat eye shape because it's the bloom that hasn't bloomed yet. So again, I'm going to do a different variation of the red and the white. And I'm painted the shape of it, and I'm just going to fill it in. I'm not going to worry about shading or anything like that right now. It's just a shape, and that shape is filled in a solid color. So that is one rose bud, and I will do a second one as well. So I did 3 circles, and I'm going to do 2 rose buds. So this next rose bud is going to be over here on the right, and this one is probably going to be going a different direction. We'll have this one going sort of diagonally to the right. Okay, so that is our base of our roses. And we kind of want to let this dry a little bit. So I'm going to go on and do some stems for our purple flowers that we're going to do later in this painting. So I had got my bright brush back, loaded it with the green and the red, used the tip of it to paint 3 stems for our purple flowers. Okay, so our circles are dried just a little bit. It's okay if they're not dried all the way. In fact, that might help us a little better if they were just a little bit not dry, so the paint would sort of blend. Anyway, I have my round brush, and you see me kind of mixing a dark red. I have that red with a little bit of white. I'm just going to start with that first dark circle that I made, and I want this red to be darker than that so it shows up. So I'm going to start in the middle, and I'm going to paint sort of like a little loopy line, and I'm going to paint these sort of curved C lines that form around the initial line, and I'm going to keep sort of painting them, they almost form in sort of a brick sort of pattern where they kind of alternate with each other, but they go around in a circle to form the bloom. So I keep painting these curved lines, working my way outwards until I get to the edge of the circle, and then I'm going to paint sort of outside of that circle. And when I paint outside the circle, the lines of it are going to form more of a flower shape. So I'm repeating that for this lighter color rose, and you may notice that on my palette I have the pure cad red, but then that darker sort of pink color that I mixed, and I'm alternating between loading my brush in the red and loading my brush in the dark pink, getting that color variation while we're painting these roses helps give it some variety in color. And so I'm going to just repeat this technique for each of my circles, forming them into a rose. Now for your rose bud, it's darker on top and lighter on bottom. So I have that darker pink color. I'm going to apply it just to the top of the rose bud. So you see me stroking down. Don't rinse your brush. Grab the white and go from the bottom and stroke up. My hand is in the way, I know, but it's going to move to show you. So stroke up with that white, and it will blend with the top part that you painted, so that you have the bottom part it shouldn't be a bright pure white, it should be blending and creating a very light pink. Okay, then, what am I doing here? So I have that very light pink, and I'm going to go in and add sort of a lighter color in these rose petals. You don't have to do this if you wanted to leave your roses as they are, and that's perfectly fine. But I'm just going to go in here with a lighter color, and I like the color variation, so I'm adding the sort of lighter pink in there, and painting more of the petals in my roses. So when you do this, you always want to just start in the center and work your way out. I am not trying to cover my petals. I'm creating sort of new lines that go in their own direction, but I'm not covering my previous lines, if that makes sense. And then I can go even further and use the pure red and add just a little bit of the red in the centers of the rose, and maybe work my way out as well with that red. So you don't want to overdo it, but you want to kind of stop when you feel like, okay, there's enough layers of colors here, because we're only working with red and white, and if we keep going, then eventually it's all going to be a circle again, because it's all going to end up blending together. So you kind of want to stop yourself before you go too far with this. The next step we're going to do is paint the stems and the petals of the roses. So I'm back to my 12 bright brush, loading some red in my green to make that darker color. And I have just the tip of my brush loaded. I'm going to use the tip of my brush to paint my stems. So starting from the flower, working my way down, and each of my roses gets a stem, and then there's going to be some stems that are branching off, and these stems are going to have leaves. So I'm also going to use my flat brush to paint my leaves. If you do not feel comfortable doing the leaves with the flat brush, if you like to paint leaves with the round brush, you can do it that way. But with the flat brush, I do the middle line first, and then I do the two outer lines on the edges, and then I paint it in solid. Color variation happens here too, so when you go reload the brush, you can load it in different amounts of the dark green and lighter green, but we will do some purposeful highlighting later, so don't do any white for now, so just use the dark green for this step. Also, my leaves sort of are in bundles of threes for the most part, so try to do bunches of 3 leaves. As to how many leaves, I did a lot because I like the look of a lot of leaves on a rose bush, but you can stop yourself when you want or keep going. And I am going to go silent here for just a little bit, and you can watch me paint all of these lovely rose leaves in. Here is where I mentioned that we are going to do some highlighting on these leaves. So grab your round brush, grab a scoop of white, and on your palette mix the white with the hooker's green. With your round brush, we're going to make a stroke only on the right side of all of our leaves. So just stroke the leaves in sort of a curve sort of formation because the leaf is curved on the right side, on all of the right side of the leaves, and we have ourselves a color variation / highlight on our rose leaves. Maybe not all of them ended up on the right side, but for the most part they are. On our rose buds, we have the leaves that are sort of under the rosebud. I can't think of that term right now, but same color, same hooker's green sort of mixed with the white color. And we're going to take our brush and we're going to stroke from the bottom. We're going to stroke some lines that are overlapping the dark pink part, and then the lines that are going down, I'm going to stroke down to create that look of the rosebud with the leaves. So I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Stroke up to overlap just the bottom part, and then stroke kind of curved downwards to create the leaves that are hanging down under the rosebud. Okay, we're going to move on to our purple flowers, and our purple flowers are actually ultramarine blue and dioxazine purple. So you only need a little bit, so load just a little bit of that blue and purple on your palette. Use a nice clean number 4 round brush, and when we do these, they're going to form sort of a triangular shape. I'm going to start at the tip of that stem that I painted, and I'm going to do all dots. So I'm loading my brush in the blue and the purple. I'm painting a whole bunch of dots, and those dots are forming sort of a triangular shape of attached to that stem that I painted a long time ago. And it takes a little bit of time to do all these dots, but keep dotting and forming your shape until it's nice and full. And you can kind of change the direction on some of these. So this one's going to kind of sway a little bit to the right. And this third one is going to sway a little bit to the left, and it's also going to be slightly taller. So I find it easier to start at the top and then kind of work my way down, since I know it's going to get slightly wider as I go down. And then the magic really happens when we load the tip of our brush in some white. So I loaded my brush in some white, dragged it out a little bit on the palette. Your white should be blending with that blue and purple. Adding the white, kind of starting from the bottom and working my way up. I kind of graduated from doing dots to more like little tiny brush marks that are sort of going diagonally, kind of crisscross. That creates the more of a texture look than just doing the dots. But if you want to just do white dots that blend with the blue and purple, you can do it that way too. This painting is almost finished. The next step after this is doing the dragonfly. So we're going to draw this dragonfly in with chalk, and its body is curved. So I'm going to use my chalk to draw a sort of curved line, and I'm going to do a circle at the tip of this line. I'm going to make his body, and I'll make his tail just a slightly thicker. So I'd have the line in the middle, and it goes to the tail, and we have the body and the head. We have the wings. The wings are an elliptical shape. I have 4 wings, so the tips of each wings will touch the body. So here's my 4th wing. Each wing is a sort of cat eye elliptical shape. This bottom right wing is going to overlap my fence a little bit. Yours may not be overlapping the fence. Yours may be in like a totally different direction. That's okay. And then I have a trail line for the direction that the dragonfly has come along. So that's the drawing of the dragonfly. I recommend maybe practicing the drawing with a pencil real quick on paper just to get it, see if you kind of understand the shape, and then when you feel comfortable with that, then get your chalk and draw it. Chalk will erase on the canvas, so if you mess it up, you can get a wet brush, erase it, and start again. We're going to paint our dragonfly in using just the round brush, and I'm going to go ahead and use that blue and purple that's still on my palette from the purple flowers, and I'm just going to load my brush in both the blue and the purple. I'm going to paint the head, the body, and the tail in. So I have the head, the body, and the tail. Just painting that in because that's the shape that I drew. The body's wider, our tail is a nice sort of thin line that curves. Okay, and I'm getting that filled in with blue and purple. I'm not going to rinse my brush. I'm going to load it with a little bit of white, and I'm going to make these sort of dot lines on my tail on the left side of the tail, and I'm going to paint a highlight line on the left side of the body. And then grab the white and sort of mix it with the blue and purple a little bit. Do the eyes, so these sort of oval shapes on each side of the circle. I'll move my hand here in a second. I messed up on my eyes the first time around, so I painted it over and painted over that highlight too because I wanted to redo that. And okay, so what I did was I grabbed my 0 brush. Actually, this is probably a 5-0 brush. So this is that very thin brush that'll really get you into those very thin, small areas. So I redid my highlight with that tiny brush, and I'm redoing my eyes with that tiny brush. A lot easier with this tiny brush. So grab a really tiny brush if you have it. It's very useful for the very tiny details of this dragonfly. Okay, I'm going to do my antennae next with the black. This is Mars black. And let's see, I'm going to get this black to flow just a little bit. So I dab just a little bit of water in there, kind of load it in there, wipe the ferrule so it's not going to drip and pool everywhere. Twist your brush when you load it, so that you can really get a nice, precise, smooth line in there. You can also draw your antennae in with a black paint pen or Sharpie if you prefer to do it that way. And so the wings, I'm going to use just white for the wings. I'm going to kind of drag it out on my palette here a little bit so there's not a whole lot of white on my brush because I want to kind of go for the dry brush look with the wings. I'm going to start at the base of each of the wings. I'm going to drag my brush in the direction of the shape, so the shape of the wing is curved. I'm going to drag it, and so I like that texture right there of dragging the paint, having it sort of be dry brush so you can still see the sky showing through. Dragonfly wings are see-through, translucent, so making sure that there's not a whole lot of paint on your brush is what's going to create that technique. Start at the base of the wing and drag your brush so the paint is kind of more full on the base, but then it dries out because you drag your brush to the tip of the wing, and that's how that effect is created. There was a tiny bit of purple that accumulated on my brush from loading the white, and that's why it looks like there's a tiny bit of purple in the wings. I like how that looks, so if you like that look, you could add a tiny bit of purple to your white, still make it dry brush, still make it translucent, but that little bit of purple adds a nice effect to it. So we have our wings. I'm going to go in with erasing my chalk line here. That's what I'm doing. Doing it very carefully, so I'm not going to get the paint to run, but just a wet brush will erase your chalk line. But there's a little bit of outlining on these wings, so I'm going to take my 0 or my tiny round brush with the black, and I'm just going to do some black lines right there on the base of the wing. So starting at the base, dragging from the base outwards and sort of outlining the outer edge of the wing as well. Gives it a nice little effect. And I'm going to show you here because the bottom wing, when I outlined it right here, I didn't quite like how that looked with the outline. So get a, so if you ever mess up, as long as the paint is still wet, grab a baby wipe and it works just like an eraser. So that black outline right there that I don't like, I'm going to use the baby wipe and it will get it off for the most part, and then I can go in there and sort of edit it. Okay. And then the last thing that I'm going to paint on this dragonfly is the little paint trail, the bug trail. So your line, your loop-de-loop line that you drew with your chalk, just paint that in with your brush with the white, and then that's it. So this long painting tutorial has come to its conclusion. I know there's a lot of details in this painting, but I really love this painting. It's so lovely. I love roses. I love dragonflies. I love anything flower and garden, and I just think it's a beautiful piece, a nice combination of colors and spring, and I hope that you enjoyed painting it with me as well. Thank you for watching. I am signing my name on the bottom real quick. I don't always show this in my videos, but I like to use the really tiny brush, usually black, water it down just slightly, and then sign your name on the bottom. That's it.